Neighbors said the smell of barbecue still lingered in the air long after the police tape went up. Smoke curled above the yard where, just hours before, children had played tag, and a mother had flipped burgers while music filled the summer sky. Now, the same grill was still warm, the same plates were still half filled with food, but the family that gathered around it was gone. 5 bodies. 1 survivor. And a man who said only 4 words when the police arrived: "They didn't love me." This is not just the story of a murder. It's the story of how love, silence, and resentment can mix like gasoline, and how one summer afternoon turned a family celebration into a massacre. Tonight, we go into the deep, to uncover what really happened at the barbecue that ended in bloodshed. Springfield, Missouri. A quiet, working-class neighborhood lined with maple trees and white fences. The kind of place where everyone waves, kids ride bikes until sunset, and weekends smell like fresh-cut grass and charcoal smoke. The Martinez family had lived on Waverly Drive for over 30 years. To their neighbors, they were the picture of closeness, always together, always laughing. At the center of it all was Maria Martinez, the family's heartbeat. A retired nurse, widowed but strong, who raised 3 children mostly on her own. Her eldest, Anthony, was the responsible one, a contractor with 2 kids of his own. Lydia, the middle child, was the peacemaker, a social worker who believed every problem could be talked through. And then there was Victor, the youngest. Victor was the one everyone worried about, the one who couldn't quite keep a job, couldn't quite stay sober, and couldn't quite face his own failures. He was the one Maria prayed for every night. Family gatherings were her way of keeping everyone connected, but as the years went on, fewer people showed up. Arguments had driven wedges between the siblings, and Victor was often at the center of them. Until one summer, Maria decided to try again. She told Lydia, "This family has been through enough. We need to come back together." That decision, to heal old wounds over a barbecue, would seal all of their fates. On June 11, 2022, Lydia sent a group message to the family chat. "Barbecue at Mom's this Sunday. Bring whatever you like. Let's make it like old times." Within minutes, Anthony replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Then came photos of ribs, jokes about who was bringing beer, and finally Victor's message: "I'll be there." It was only 3 words, but those 3 words filled Maria with hope. She told her neighbor, "Victor's coming. Maybe this time things will be better." What she didn't know was that Victor had been spiraling for months. He'd lost his apartment, his car, and what little stability he had left. He'd been drinking daily, isolated, sleeping in a friend's basement. And that week he purchased a 9mm handgun. When asked later why, Victor said, "Just in case things went wrong." Sunday, June 13, 2022. The weather was perfect. Blue skies, 85 degrees, a gentle breeze moving through the trees. Maria woke up early, marinating meat and setting the table on the back porch. By noon, the yard was filled with people. Lydia's kids running through sprinklers, Anthony flipping burgers, Maria beaming as she watched her family together again. Then at 12:43 p.m., Victor's car pulled up. He sat there for a long time before getting out. Neighbors noticed he wasn't smiling. He didn't bring a dish, just a 6-pack, and a dark look that made even Maria pause. Still, she hugged him. She said softly, "I'm glad you came." He didn't answer. Inside his jacket, tucked beneath the fabric, was his gun. For the first hour, things seemed fine, at least on the surface. Victor sat apart from everyone, drinking quietly. He barely touched his plate. Anthony tried to make conversation, joking about sports, the grill, the kids. But every comment seemed to land wrong. Witnesses later said Victor looked disconnected, like he was there physically but mentally somewhere far away. When Maria brought him another plate, she said, "Eat, Mijo. You're too thin." He stared at her and muttered, "You always say that." Lydia noticed the tension building and tried to change the subject. But one offhand comment, something small, something meaningless, was all it took. Anthony, trying to be encouraging, said, "You just gotta get back on your feet, bro, things will turn around." Victor's jaw tightened. His voice dropped low. "You think I'm a loser, don't you?" Anthony raised his hands, laughing it off. "No man, I'm just saying." But Victor didn't hear that. He heard judgment. The house on Waverly Drive remains empty, its yard overgrown, its grill rusting in silence. When we hear stories like this, our instinct is to ask why. Why would someone destroy the people who loved them most? How could anyone do that? But the truth is rarely simple. Violence like this doesn't appear overnight. It festers quietly behind closed doors, in whispered arguments and unspoken pain. The Martinez family believed love could fix anything. They believed forgiveness was enough. But love, without boundaries or awareness, can sometimes blind us to danger. Victor wasn't born a killer. He became one, slowly through years of resentment, isolation, and untreated pain. And while nothing can justify what he did, understanding why he did it may help prevent the next tragedy like it. So tonight, as you finish this story, take a moment to look around your own life. Who might be struggling silently? Who's drifting away unnoticed behind their own smile? Because sometimes, the scariest monsters aren't strangers in the dark. They're people we love, drowning quietly, waiting for someone to notice before it's too late. I'm your narrator, and this has been Into the Deep. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and hold your loved ones close. In memory of the Martinez family, may their story remind us to listen before it's too late. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, depression, or family violence, please reach out. Help is always available. He heard pity. He heard every word he'd been avoiding for years. And in that moment, the resentment he'd buried for decades finally surfaced. He stood up, knocking over his chair, muttering something no one could make out, then disappeared into the house. Maria followed. And what happened next would change everything. Inside the kitchen, Maria found Victor standing by the counter, shaking. He had his hand on the inside of his jacket. She spoke softly, "Please, Victor. Let's just sit and talk." He turned to her, tears in his eyes, and whispered, "You always loved them more." Then he pulled the gun. At 3:47 p.m., the first shot rang out. Maria fell instantly. Outside, laughter froze. Lydia turned toward the sound, confused, and then came the second shot. And the third. Panic erupted. Screams, footsteps, the clatter of dishes hitting the ground. Victor walked out of the house, gun in hand, expressionless. Anthony rushed him, shouting his name, but Victor fired again, hitting him in the chest. Lydia grabbed her kids and ran, yelling for everyone to get out. One child tripped on the porch steps as more shots echoed through the yard. Neighbors called 911. The dispatcher's log from that day simply reads, "Multiple shots fired. Children screaming. Suspect still on scene." When officers arrived 7 minutes later, they found Victor standing in the backyard. The gun lay on the grass beside him. He raised his hands and said almost calmly, "It's done." 5 people were dead. Maria, Anthony, Lydia's husband, Daniel, and 2 young cousins who had been playing near the shed. Lydia and her children survived only because they hid behind a neighbor's fence. In the aftermath, investigators described the scene as one of the most devastating domestic incidents in Springfield's history. A backyard that hours before had been filled with food and laughter was now littered with blood-stained plates and overturned lawn chairs. Detectives later found Victor's phone in his car. In the Notes app, one message stood out. "Maybe now they'll understand." At first, police thought the shooting might have been spontaneous. A sudden argument turned deadly. But evidence suggested otherwise. Victor had purchased the gun 3 days earlier. He'd researched firing ranges and watched online videos about reloading. He had even written himself a note titled, "How to End It Clean." It wasn't a snap decision. It was premeditated. Psychologists who later studied the case described Victor's mindset as collapsed narcissism. He wasn't proud, but he couldn't bear humiliation. Every success his siblings achieved made his failures feel sharper. He began to see himself as the family's black sheep, a role he both hated and embraced. Dr. Karen Holt, who reviewed the case, explained it this way: "When someone feels unloved long enough, that pain becomes identity." Victor didn't want forgiveness. He wanted significance, even if it meant destruction. The tragedy wasn't just in what he did, it was in how long the warning signs had been there, and how little anyone could do to stop the inevitable. In January 2023, the case of State of Missouri versus Victor Martinez went to trial. The defense pleaded insanity, claiming Victor had been suffering from psychosis triggered by alcohol withdrawal and mental illness. But the prosecution painted a different picture. A man who knew exactly what he was doing. A man who chose revenge over redemption. They presented the texts, the gun purchase, the note on his phone, and the calm surrender as evidence of intent. When Victor took the stand, he spoke only briefly. He said, "I didn't mean to kill them all. I just wanted them to feel my pain." The courtroom went silent. Lydia, sitting in the front row, wept quietly. She later told reporters, "He looked right at me, and I saw nothing. Just emptiness." After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. Victor Martinez was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He has not spoken to his surviving family since. In the days that followed, the Martinez home became a memorial site. Candles, flowers, and handwritten notes covered the front steps. Neighbors left meals on the porch, unsure what else to do. Local news outlets called it the BBQ Massacre. But to those who knew the family, it was simply unthinkable. Maria's friends remembered her as gentle and forgiving, the kind of person who believed no one was beyond saving. Perhaps that belief, the same one that made her such a loving mother, was what blinded her to the danger Victor had become. Today, Lydia and her children live with relatives in another state. They visit Springfield once a year, quietly, to leave flowers at the cemetery. The house on Waverly Drive remains empty, its yard overgrown, its grill rusting in silence. When we hear stories like this, our instinct is to ask why. Why would someone destroy the people who loved them most? How could anyone do that? But the truth is rarely simple. Violence like this doesn't appear overnight. It festers quietly behind closed doors, in whispered arguments and unspoken pain. The Martinez family believed love could fix anything. They believed forgiveness was enough. But love, without boundaries or awareness, can sometimes blind us to danger. Victor wasn't born a killer. He became one, slowly, through years of resentment, isolation, and untreated pain. And while nothing can justify what he did, understanding why he did it may help prevent the next tragedy like it. So tonight, as you finish this story, take a moment to look around your own life. Who might be struggling silently? Who's drifting away unnoticed behind their own smile? Because sometimes, the scariest monsters aren't strangers in the dark. They're people we love, drowning quietly, waiting for someone to notice before it's too late. I'm your narrator, and this has been Into the Deep. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and hold your loved ones close. In memory of the Martinez family, may their story remind us to listen before it's too late. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, depression, or family violence, please reach out. Help is always available.